start filming. Hit it, buddy. Let's go, bro. You got this. Oh, yo. Send it this too. Right, actually.
You got us, Owen.
Let's go. Yes!
Welcome back to another episode of the Sports Business Leaders Podcast. My name is Justin Tichinell, and on today's episode, we're featuring Greg Rowe, co-founder of the Freestyle Trampoline Association. Thanks for joining, Greg.
Thanks for having me, Justin. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Greg. Really appreciate you making the time. Pumped to ask you some questions, learn a little more about your background in the Freestyle Trampoline Association. Greg Rowe is the co-founder of the Freestyle Trampoline Association and is one of the most innovative entrepreneurs in action sports. He was on Team Canada. He built a global sport on Instagram in the Freestyle Trampoline Association. And Greg has really redefined what it truly means to lead with creativity, tradition, and turned a niche passion into a business ecosystem. So let's jump right in. Now, you've obviously called the Freestyle Trampoline Association the sport board on Instagram. How did you go from being an athlete and doing the day-to-day of being a gymnast and being, a tricker or in the trampoline lifestyle to an entrepreneur? And when did you realize there was a business opportunity around what you were doing in trampoline?
Well, it actually wasn't us that named it. It was the New York Times and the LA Times that called us the sport board on Instagram because one of their reporters came to one of our first ever events and said, hey, this is an amazing community, before we just had barely got started. So if I back up a little bit, I was on Team Canada, and the whole entrepreneurial side was born from literally just my frustrations with being on Team Canada, and not specifically the people on Team Canada, but just the structure that was there and the whole IOC movement and just the politics and the lack of transparency and the lack of really honestly caring about the athletes and trying to do what's best for them. Really, I always felt that it was the coaches and then the managers of these different training clubs and the federation members and all of these guys were the ones hoarding all the value and everything. And this is what I thought at first. But then I realized that, so at first I thought, you guys are just bad people that aren't sharing the wealth here. Then I realized they don't know what they're doing. These guys are not experts. They're never going to get hired by Formula One to be the lead marketing for, the race and wherever, they're not going to get hired by UFC. These are not experts. And that's kind of where I realized, hey, there's an opening here because the trampoline gymnastics people don't really understand what they're doing. They're stuck in one little thing from 1881 is when they kind of started. This was before World War I. You know what I mean? So that's where they live, and they haven't really gotten out of it. And this has opened up a lot of doors. I'm only one of the people that have seen this opening, where parkour actually saw this before. They said, look, I don't want to wear tights in gymnastics. I don't want to be told what to do. I want to have control over my own life. So let me go do parkour, which is like a French word for movements and stuff like that. And all the French guys might kill me for not knowing the exact nomenclature for the word, but it basically means to get out there, move, be, all that. So they said, look, we're going to do this ourselves. We don't need the federation. We're going to do it, and we're going to do it between the athletes, by the athletes, peer-to-peer, do it yourself. Let's get rid of all that ugly old infrastructure that really wasn't doing as much good as people thought, because now social media was infrastructure and YouTube is infrastructure, and just the way that people live and the normal discord of humanity has changed a little bit. Back in the 60s, 70s, it was all about national pride. It was about being structured and boom, lining up in order, and that's how you showed people that you were a value member of society. But that has changed for a million different reasons. But now it's, well, what's unique about me? What's special about me? And I saw that the gymnastics people weren't changing. They weren't evolving, and they weren't really listening to the athletes. And the little guys like me, there's number 3 or 4 on Team Canada, say, hey, how do I get more out of this opportunity? And they just basically said, there is no more. Well, I go to the Olympics. What do I get if I go to the Olympics? Nothing. Basically, Rosie goes to the Olympics. She won 2 times, 2 cycles. Rosie McLennan, nice girl, everything like that. But that's 20 years she'll never get back, and no one's ever heard of her. She's the best in the world at what she does, and there's no infrastructure to get her paid. What happens if she could look back now and say, well, if I took up football or I took up basketball or any of these other sports, I would have been a millionaire by now. So what's wrong with the infrastructure in gymnastics that makes basically someone waste their life going through that, and then by the time they realize it's a waste, it's too late. You're now 20 years old and you're not going to pick up a new sport most likely. So I saw this as the big problem. I said, guys, we got to fix this whole infrastructure. The economic system makes no sense. No one's getting paid. Coaches are abusing athletes. The educational system leaves a lot to be desired. There's no real psychology or updated understanding of human behavior in the training. It's still, again, everything from the 50s and 60s, and the people that wrote those books are still alive and kicking. So they're not allowed to get rid of them yet, kind of legacy and all this sort of stuff. So you have all these problems balling together in different shapes and forms all over. So I said, look, we're going to make this different, and we're going to rebuild the entire system. But that's all of it, not just, make a better judging system. No, it's an economic system. It's the way you treat the athletes, the way you bring the athletes into the conversations right from the get-go. Because a lot of times I didn't know who the president of Team Canada was. I never knew the president of Gymnastics Canada or any of that. That was just, dudes in suits, over there, they don't care about me. That was the portrayal of how they worked, unless you were like the little pet of Team Canada or something like that, and then they treat you really good, they pat you on the head and everything, and then you pretend like you're all good, but everyone else was thrown away. So I try to see if there's a system we could build that didn't throw people away, that said, no, we are bringing you in, but we're going to find a place for you based on your strengths and weaknesses, and we're going to work together, and rising tides raises all boats kind of thing. Let's create something more like that, not just where one person wins and everyone else gets basically thrown away and retires broken because of all the injuries with no money in their pockets. Like, it's a bad system. So that was kind of what, and I saw the opening because everyone else was looking for this. That's where parkour did the exact same thing, and we kind of followed in the footsteps of parkour. So it's an overall trend. I'm only one guy that's thinking this way. Lots of the youth of today wouldn't be caught dead trying to be on Team Canada anymore.
Yeah. No, this is really cool, Greg, and just learning about your business and all the different sectors that you've talked about, and just from your explanation there, you're really visionary, and you're understanding what are the problems right now and how can we solve those issues in the future. And that's really what entrepreneurship's all about. It's about understanding and being creative for making these solutions to these problems. So with that in mind, and just for the audience to know, so you obviously have the multiple sectors of your business with the events, the coaching, the media, the esports, and now you have the training centers coming up. Can you talk about how you see the future, and how you're going to be using what you've learned in your experience so far to continue to just improve your overall business as a whole?
Yeah, there's a million things I'm going to have to do over the next while. But if I had to try to pinpoint a couple things that really stick with me on a day-to-day basis, one, it's the psychology and biology of human behavior. If you don't know who B.F. Skinner is, then just put down your marketing textbook and go learn who that guy is first. That guy will teach you why people do marketing the way they do. So understanding the nuts and bolts of human behavior is big. So I have a kinesiology background. That's where I really got into how the mitochondria work and how it creates energy for the body and why it creates energy in a certain way and how people expel energy in a certain way. Because then when I'm in the business mode, I'm in a meeting, I'm thinking, okay, this creature over here is going to expel energy in this way and this way and this way based on the huge amounts of biology textbooks and psychology and out there, and I am applying all that into funnels, and I'm creating a pathway for these, if we're going to use a B.F. Skinner analogy, for these rats, because he always did so much work on rats and mice and stuff like that. So you're making this maze for these rats, and they have to go down this maze, and this is the value prop maze, essentially, where you're saying, okay, so all the stakeholders that are building that maze, the customer needs to want to go down that maze first. So if you're not thinking from a psychologically position, a subconscious subconscious position, right? Thinking, what would Freud say about this? What would Carl Sagan, even at least quantum physicists? There's a lot of psychology in quantum physics because you have to understand how that all works, right? But you need to really get into the nuts and bolts of human behavior and biology and all that first, and then try to apply it to business instead of just listening to some, self proclaimed, I'll turn your revenues into $100 million overnight. Pay me. These guys need to go away. And instead, there's so much free information out there from textbooks. Go and get the psychology and biology and just human history and understand the pathway that you're on. Then you can start making more calculated decisions of where you want to go in the future. I would say that's really probably the big thing that is, I would say, missing. Everyone's so analytical about, well, if you just change the design of this billboard like this, and yes, there is a room and place for that stuff, but the reason that we've been able to get such a big community behind us very, very quickly compared to other sports that take 30, 40, 50 years to get to the levels and the events that you see Barcelona behind us. These events, it's not easy to get into those. You have to be doing something right, but that's coming from the biology and psychology side. It's not because some brand marketing person said, oh, well, if you put the logo this way, then it's not like that. It's knowing where humans really tick and what they really need, and figure that out first, and then take your MBA afterwards. That's what I would say would be a big point.
Yeah, and it's so crazy to think about this, Greg. It's so many people don't understand how people work, and just to your point, that I think that's how so many people fail. So go just thinking about this as a whole. You've obviously been working in all these different sectors, and you have a lot of experience, and your background when it comes to understanding human behavior has helped shape your business philosophies. So, if you had to go back 10 years ago and think about, when you were just getting started, or even, before then, what advice would you give to entrepreneurs that are trying to build something unconventional, especially, in an industry that doesn't always, like, it's not always 100% clear, like, where it's going?
Yeah, this is where I always get into somewhat heated debates with people about how focused you should be, jack of all trades, ace of none kind of thing. If I could go back knowing what I know now, I would honestly do the exact same thing. I just would have streamlined a little bit better, would have tightened it up, wouldn't have made as many mistakes. I wouldn't have tried to do B2B relationships or hired people that were complete bozos. I would have done a lot more due diligence on trying to pick the right partners. But I think the thing that really still sticks with me that I'm still going to use for my future is have a very wide range of businesses and industries that you can play in. If you are only stuck in this one linear little marketing channel, or just real estate, or just the restaurant business, or just, then you've basically limited yourself 100% of what is possible, because the creativity comes from you going outside of what you know, finding something you don't know, and then bringing it into what you know. That's how creativity fundamentally works. So if you're only working from a very narrow set of skills and understanding about just the way the world works, then you can't be creative. You won't know how to do it. You know what I mean? But if you can go out there and say, okay, well, when we first started, for example, so we got the franchise disclosure document back during COVID, right? When we were thinking about opening up a rental spot for Airbnb, because that was how are you going to pay the bills during COVID, right? Oh, well, people are going to live there. So we were actually legitimately serious about thinking about doing that. And that got us to think about opening up a training center, which we could live in the training center, plus then monetize it in different ways. But we then end up sitting on that for, what was it, 5 years now, before we could really activate. But we spent the $25K to get the FTD done from the legal side right then and there, because we knew that that's where we wanted to go, right? And then we built a video game. That was a prototype, but it wasn't very good. It was a great prototype, but it wasn't like AAA or anything like that. And we know we couldn't sell it to a major publisher quite yet, but we knew to put some money into that and get that going, because that was going to shape how we thought about it, right? And by planting these seeds everywhere and really just never saying no to anything, and saying, well, even if it's something I don't have time for, let's find a way to make time for it, or let's find someone in our network that wants to do that, and then we can bring them on as a B2B partner. They can facilitate that agreement for us. We can still get a little kick out of it, but we're still diversifying. We're not saying no. I see a lot of people say, oh, well, that's not what we do. Well, then they go bankrupt 10 months later because that's all they don't do that other thing. They're not diverse enough. And if you look at the OTT space, the media space, which we're launching our own fast channel OTT, right? Now there are thousands of channels. You can invent your own broadcast network if you want to, right? Now you can't say no. You have to say, hey, there is so much out there. So now if you don't do that, you're actually losing, right? So it's more about saying yes to all opportunities. And if you don't like the opportunity, then you don't have to. But you shouldn't be saying no because you can't do it. If there's something, I don't know how AI works. The answer isn't, well, AI is stupid and it's going to take over the world, so I'm not going to focus on it because I have morality, because I care about, big tech stealing all my privacy. That's not the answer. That's the answer to make you lose and make you poor forever, basically, because that's the answer that people use to block themselves from understanding how the rest of the world works, right? And it gets back to my earlier point. If you don't really know why AI became a thing and so powerful that companies are dumping billions of dollars into it, then you're missing a huge part of what's gotten humanity here, which means that you won't know where it's going next, right? So it all comes back down to just being very diverse, being very open. And when people tell you, no, we don't have time for that and that and that, I say, yeah, you do have time for it. Go put the extra 6 hours a day in, and don't go on that extra date with your girlfriend. Don't go see the movies. Don't go do any of that stuff. Because if you actually care about your business, you won't care about that stuff until you're successful, or at least at a position where things are looking pretty good, and then you can go relax. But I see too many people relaxing at the start, and they're not just hustling in every single direction to try to gather that information and then make a calculated decision with a large amount of data about all these different industries. They just sort of say, well, I like podcasting, so that's all they do. And well, they quickly give up because there's not enough uniqueness into that by itself. They need to now figure out how to put AI into it, and then put esports into that, and then get into this company and that company, and then merge it together. And that's how you'll have longevity as the world just turns in a way that you'll never predict. So you better be ready for anything.
Yeah. No, this is all great, Greg. And I think the biggest takeaway that I have here is you're talking about never saying no to opportunity. And I 100% agree. And at the same time, you have to have a vision of where you want to go. Because if you say yes to everything but don't have a vision, then all those opportunities mean nothing. I think just knowing where you want to go is the most important thing. And then hitting on another point that you just mentioned was talking about community. And I think that's the reason why you were able to be so successful as you got started was obviously one, you talked about hustling, and that's what it takes. I mean, you can't you can't not you can't succeed without the hustle. You got to put in the time. But the other part of it too is the community aspect, and it sounds like you've really understood and put together a great community of people in the gymnastics and trampoline world. So, congrats on all that. And that's obviously something that we also believe in too with the sports business leaders is it's all centered around community. And the more people that you put around yourself that are smarter, that have more experience than you, it only rises your level of skill and your ability to succeed. So I think this is all great, Greg. Really appreciate you sharing that. Now, any last words you want to share with the audience today?
There's a million directions you can go with it, but I'll just trumpet your point about community. It is about community. And I actually had a podcast the other day about it, and I think I articulated it for the first time, at least in my own mind, that the reason community matters so much from just a numbers perspective is that when you go on Google Ads and you spend $1,000 to go get in front of 30,000 people or whatever it is, you're paying per person. That's kind of it, generally speaking. When you're building community, though, you are now saying, okay, well, this one person now knows 5 people, and they're going to go tell their 5 people, and those 5 people are going to go tell their 5 people, and all of a sudden, for the same amount of work from one person, from the kind of initial start point, that explodes outwards. So there's definitely a numerical value to playing the community card, but also I just want to make sure it's clear for everybody, we did not build a community from nothing. The community already existed. It was very small, and it was basically just a bunch of crazy kids in their backyards hucking and chucking crazy stuff without any structure. We came in and saw that there was a community that could be built if they had the structure. We took on the role of building the infrastructure because they didn't know how to do it. They're 12, 13, 14 years old. Mom and dad had no no business in the sports world or entertainment, media, or anything like that. They weren't high-level trampolinists. They just didn't have the skill sets. So we came in and started building all that for them. They go out there and they do the community side. They're out there hustling and trying to host events, and they're doing, like, so we have our Israel guys, they're building events out there. Our Spanish guys are building events out there. They just kind of chit chat with us every week, say, hey, Greg, what about this? And there's the sponsors and blah, blah. And we're just networking together. But they're the ones really building it from that public facing side. We're building the infrastructure underneath and doing the deals with the bigger broadcasters that you're not going to do publicly on LinkedIn or anything like that. But we do that sort of side because we know that side. So that's the infrastructure underneath, but they're the ones on top that are more public facing. So you need to have a little bit of both. So you got to decide, where are the people going? Are they going to be the ones out there getting viral videos like Sebi here in my background? Or are they going to be more the type to want to sit down and study a broadcast tape and give you 30 notes on how we can do it better next year? You know what I mean? And you got to really figure out where these people go, but you got to give them a place. And this again goes right back to the start. The more diverse your community has allowances for, then yes, you have your North Star. We are going to become the next biggest action sport. There we go. What do we now need to do with it? Well, we need to have esports. We need media. We need all these different industries to be able to do that. And then you can plug and play all the different community members where they feel comfortable. You're not telling them they have to do it. They're coming to us saying, Greg, I love vlogging. I'm going to go to this event, this playground festival that we're doing in Sweden. Can I just go and vlog? You can have my content. Sure, let's see if we can maybe get you a sponsor too to help you. Thank you for suggesting. They're coming to us offering these things. We're not running after them with their, saying, please do this for me. They're the ones doing it and really leading it. We're just the ones making the engine behind the scenes work. And I think you need to have that distinction in how you're creating that structure in your business, because there is an engine behind every business and there is a public facing persona, and they're not the same personality usually. They're usually different mentalities. So everyone's got to be placed in a place that they want to be placed in, not just stuffed a circle in a square peg kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. So this is all great, Greg. Really appreciate, again, you sharing today.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Justin. Really appreciate being able to tell our story a little bit to your audience and your platform, and I wish you the best of luck.